Newton witnessed an apple falling and discovered gravity. Ruth Graves tried to bake a cake and accidentally discovered chocolate chips. Tracy Chapman was busking her way to her big break. We all wish for one opportunity, one unexpected chance to succeed, one rare possibility to change our lives forever. We can't all wait for an apple to fall, but we all want to be in the right place at the right time, where opportunities are carefully suggested and possibilities are available to all. INX1, Wealth of Investment Opportunities.
Yes. Hello and welcome to the Legal Eagle meetup. We have three lions, three apes, three legends in the house, and that will help me and help you make sense of the evolving world of Web3 regulation. Now, in the last couple of weeks, even if you was living under a rock, you probably got some smoke signals of a lot of developments happening in the space, whether it's enforcement action by the SEC, whether it's the SEC getting a taste of its own medicine on Capitol Hill, whether it's the European Union passing one of the most comprehensive, if not the most comprehensive, crypto regulation out there. You cannot have missed it, and we have three experts here to help make sense of it all. Because, as I mentioned earlier, we're not selling shoes. We're in the intersection of finance, technology, and these are two very highly regulated sectors, and that regulation is catching up to the crypto space, digital assets. So without further ado, Yitzi, John, Aaron, please let us know who you are. What's your favorite ape trait, and let's take it from there.
I'm happy to take it. So it's such a pleasure to be here. David, as you know, I've been involved with INX since 2018. So the INX token was actually issued out of a Gibraltar entity. So that was an incredible achievement for us here in Gibraltar. Spent, 11, 12 rounds of feedback with the SEC over 2 years. I don't even want to ask how much it cost the INX team. But it was absolutely amazing that with the SEC, we all know the SEC's approach to crypto. We all know how uncertain everything is over there in the US. It was amazing to get the INX token approved by the SEC. And the great story for us here in Gibraltar is that it wasn't even. And remember that the registration, as far as I'm aware, it was the first security token and the only one that has been approved for public offering. So not benefiting from any of the exemptions, but the wonderful story for us is that it wasn't even a US entity. It was a Gibraltar company that was the token issuer. So that was an amazing achievement for all involved. And so you can imagine what a pleasure it is for me to be on this panel today. And we'll to introduce myself, I'm a lawyer. I'm a crypto lawyer in Gibraltar. I'm a partner at Hassan's International Law Firm, and we've been basically putting a lot of resources since 2016 into the crypto industry. So we've developed quite a big team here internally.
Thanks, Aaron.
Sorry for cutting you off, but as I was mentioning, we'll get to exactly why Gibraltar and why US, EU. We'll get into all the different jurisdictions. So Yitzi Hammer, welcome to the show.
Thanks. And it's great to be here among friends. I had the opportunity to meet both John and Aaron in New York last year, and I've met you a few times at local events here in Tel Aviv. I'm based here in Israel. I'm an Israeli lawyer, and my practice, DLT law, focuses exclusively on the blockchain industry. We work with investors in the crypto space and companies that are building in this space. And while we're based here in Israel, our clientele are very much from all over the globe. We have partners in Singapore, New York, California, all over Europe that we work very closely with to service our clients in their various fields. I think that it's an industry that is so that is, because the products are decentralized, I think that the services need to be decentralized as well. And I think that's why having these conversations around regulation are so important. It's even if you're an entity that's based here in Israel and the majority of your activity is in Israel, if your products are decentralized and your users are decentralized, you're going to be subject to multiple regulatory frameworks, be it in the EU or in the US or all throughout Asia. So it's really important for everybody to stay on top of what's going on in these varying regulatory frameworks. I know that as an Israeli lawyer, I care much more about what's going on in the US than I do here locally. So it's a real pleasure to learn from my friends and colleagues here.
Okay, I guess I'll take it from there. And also wanted to say, David, thank you for the invitation, and INX, very, very grateful to be here and amongst, really a global audience, because that's what makes crypto great, is the way, to pick up on what Yitzi just said. We're dealing with decentralized, distributed systems, and the industry truly is global, and as it emerges and continues to grow, that aspect of it will just continue to grow and to proliferate. And so I think that's just really exciting. And it's great to be amongst lawyers who focus on different areas in different jurisdictions, but with the understanding that we all, are in this together, and to be able to collaborate with people globally is really a great thing with the modern technology that we have. So, as you said earlier, I'm John Gutke. I'm a U.S. attorney based in Las Vegas, Nevada. And my practice also is very international. I think I definitely don't have any clients that are based in Nevada anymore, now that I'm focusing solely on crypto for the last 3 years or so. But everyone, of course, wants to know what's going on in the United States. And so, United States regulation is always forefront in the mind. And so following that has been very interesting. My practice historically, before I really shifted and pivoted my attention towards crypto, has been with business law, business litigation, primarily. A lot of time spent in the courtroom, going to trial. And I got at my shift. We may be able to get into more of this later. I'll give a quick overview. But I kind of pivoted fully towards crypto about 3 years ago after having a lawsuit where I was in court against the CFTC, defending a client there on an enforcement action, and just really seeing how complicated it is to navigate these regulatory waters right now when it's so new and there's very little precedent and very clear guidance. So I thought this is something that this is a technology that I'm very passionate about and that I want to see grow. And so it's been really rewarding to be able to work with builders and innovators that are working in this space. So I'm excited to be here and have the discussion with you all.
Thank you, guys, and thank you to your little ape friend in the background. Say hello, everybody.
This is my spirit animal. Yeah.
So he's watching us, making sure we don't give any financial advice without disclaimers. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it, because last week I'm sure you guys all watched. Maybe you watched it live, maybe you watched the reruns with some popcorn. But Gary Gensler came to the House Financial Services Committee to answer a few questions. As is normal in these kind of hearings, you have people on both sides of the aisle, and some people who are less friendly towards crypto were throwing him softballs. They were coddling him, so to speak. But then there was a nice chunk of pro-crypto congressmen and women that were actually going against Gensler, giving him the hard question, and one actually threatened to fire him. And the hashtag Fire Gary Gensler started trending. So I'm curious, what was going through your guys' mind as lawyers, that have to actually deal with the repercussions of these committee hearings? What was going through your guys' mind when you were watching Gensler up there getting hammered, frankly, by some senators and by some congressmen?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll take this one first. what was going through my mind, we spoke about it a little bit earlier, and it's something that I wrote about extensively online, is how Gary Gensler, perhaps single-handedly, has taken the U.S. market from being one that was typically, the most relevant, most attractive, and turned it into, because of regulatory uncertainty and almost haphazard enforcement policies, has turned it into a market where companies don't want to be active because the exposure is too great, and the rules are not clear. And also for consumers, U.S. consumers, are forced to, who are keen on the industry and want to be active and want to acquire all various digital assets that are no longer being made available in the United States under U.S. regulatory oversight, are forced to use VPNs and whatnot to try and gain access to these products outside of the U.S., where they're not subject to the same scrutiny and regulatory oversight that U.S. consumers have come to expect. And by doing that, the SEC has failed in its main task, which is to protect U.S. investors and consumers. So when I was watching Gary, making a complete idiot of himself, that was kind of what was going through my mind. I'm curious to hear, like, from John, as a U.S. consumer, how that, and as a lawyer, obviously, how that makes you feel. And I'm sure you could tell me from a professional perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with what you said. It's just, first of all, what my reaction was, David, as I was watching them grill him, was, okay, first of all, it's about time. It's about time that he sit in front of Congress and take that grilling. And it also was just refreshing to see that we have a Congress. And so I'm not always an optimist when it comes to crypto. It's like when you have been investing and certainly building and practicing law in this space for a while, I think you start to get a little bit jaded, and you start to think that sometimes you want to just give up on the world, right? On the rest of, on the regulators and politicians and other normies of different shapes and stripes, and think, okay, that's the people learn this is never going to understand. But I was very encouraged and becoming more optimistic, even though the state of regulation seems still very unclear and frustrating, definitely very frustrating. I'm still optimistic more and more that we actually have politicians in Congress that do understand the technology, at least somewhat, more than before. And they're able to ask questions that are relevant and more pointed than what I've seen, even if you went back to a congressional hearing a year ago. And certainly I recall some hearings in 2021 around the time when there was a big ruckus that was caused when definitions were put into legislation about what constitutes a broker, right, or a custodian. And so what I guess I'm trying to say is I was very encouraged to see how many people on that committee seemed so focused on crypto, because keep in mind, this was not a crypto hearing. This was a general oversight hearing of the House Financial Services Committee. And if you read Gary Gensler's testimony that he prepared and submitted before the hearing, it was, I don't know, maybe 20 pages, covering all kinds of topics, and really only just a section of, I would say maybe 20% or less even of his prepared testimony covered crypto. But yet in the hearing, it was very focused on crypto. There was a lot of information and things that talked about subjects unrelated to crypto. But for the most part, and certainly the hard questions that he got all had to do with our industry. So that to me was very exciting. And I think, and I'm hopeful that we're maybe turning a corner here with regulation in the United States to where we do have people that realize what an important issue this is, what an important industry this is, what an important technology it is that the industry is building out. And I hope that we're going to get some sensible and more clear regulation because of that. So I took it as being a very encouraging hearing, for him getting grilled, maybe getting exposed, as Yitzi said, and having to kind of come in and explain himself a little bit. And one additional comment I'll make before I let someone else speak is that, I thought it was really telling that when there was one line of questioning, I believe it was Congressman Torres, who, interestingly enough, is coming from the left. He's a Democrat and a young one. And so that's encouraging as well. I think a lot of times you see the politicians that get it and understand it and ask good questions tend to be on the younger end of the spectrum. And my political rant of the day, I'll try to not get into any more than this one, but I really think we just need younger, more future-focused politicians to be, representing everyone, right, globally. I think that's something that would be helpful, not just for our industry, but in general, having leaders that are thinking in the future, because we have a very fast-moving and evolving society nowadays, right? And so we need to be able to adapt more quickly to change than maybe, not to a boomer shame, but more than what people of prior generations are used to. They're used to change happening very slowly, but it's happening very, very quickly now. So what Congressman Torres talked about was, he pointed out the fallacy of this harsh regulatory stance that Gary Gensler is taking by saying, you're doing all this regulation, but why haven't you gone after in your enforcement actions people that are offshore? Because you're pushing people offshore, but then you're bringing regulatory actions against the people that are here trying to build within the proper frameworks and what we are able to do. And he gave an answer that was really telling to me, at least, and where he basically admitted that it's difficult to go after. It's just a harder process for them to try to sue, for example, FTX in the Bahamas. And that's basically why they didn't sue them, which I thought was crazy. He's saying basically we're going to let people get away with things if they don't come here. And that, I think, is going to expose a flaw with the US's approach. And when we see other jurisdictions now passing regulation and passing legislation, right? Laws like MICA. Do you guys say MICA or Mika, by the way? I've heard it different ways. What do you say in
Mika?
Mika, I say Mika, yeah.
Okay, so seeing that Mika being passed, I think is going to be a big wake-up call to the United States when they see that, okay, the narrative maybe we've heard is that this is, some sort of a sketchy underworld. If you listen to people like Elizabeth Warren, people involved in crypto, according to her, are shadowy super coders. And this is something that's in the shadow for criminals only. But now, more and more as politicians get educated and see, okay, the EU is passing legislation. Companies are moving offshore. We are missing out on opportunities here. The groundswell, I think, is rising for the tide to turn on this and for things to happen in a more constructive manner, I think, from here on out.
I'm sorry to interject. I just want to say one more thing on this topic. Another thing that was going through my mind, and then I'll pass the mic over to you, Aaron. I'm sorry. Is it was kind of like I had a bit of an epiphany when I went to law school. I wanted to be a litigator. Like I read like John Grisham books. I felt like this is what like real lawyers do. Unfortunately, I've never been into a court because everybody told me in school, like, you speak English, you should go do like M&A, capital markets, high tech, and all that. I'm like, yeah, but I kind of want to be like a real lawyer. Like, no, but nobody really speaks English well enough in this country. You'll be able to, one up them. And I kind of like went with what people were saying, and I went in that direction, but I was very skeptical. I was like, I'm sure that it's going to be like me in, a pool of many, many fish. But when I actually like got to like the top firms here in Israel, I saw like people don't really speak English at like at the level that I would assume. And I had like a little bit of like the same kind of thing in when Gary was speaking, and I'll tell you what I mean. People are always saying it's in the crypto industry we're early, right? And you keep thinking, okay, we said we were early last year, and we said we were early 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I don't think we're early anymore. Like, we must have missed the boat at some point. Somebody said to me the other day, like, if you've been in crypto since 2016 and you're not a multimillionaire, like, you're lying. But when I heard Gary speaking, and I realized that like people, one of Gary's defenses, it was I've been lecturing on blockchain in MIT since I don't know when, right? And he's purported to be an expert in blockchain. But a guy like that who also admittedly never bought Bitcoin or any other coin and never had a wallet, like, are you kidding me? These are the people who are teaching our children, so to speak. These are the people who are the face of crypto. So it made me realize, like, we really are early. Like, there really are still like a very small pool of people who really understand these technologies at a deep enough level to be able to educate and to make changes. So, like, I very much relate to what you're saying, John, that we need younger regulators, at least in terms of their mindset, who are willing to learn new technologies, overcome hurdles in the sense that, like, it might not be the exact same thing copy paste from what the previous trend was, and this goes to this goes to our regulators, but also to our judges and our court systems. I know in Israel, the court systems are way behind. Like, even though the regulators are sort of fighting to make laws and to be the ones who will be heard in this space, the courts are miles and miles behind. They don't understand the technologies. They don't understand the regulations. So I think that there definitely there's an opportunity for anybody out there who's semi-competent and understands these technologies to make something for herself, in this industry. And B, like, we really need to educate more. We need to educate our lawmakers. We need to educate our people working in government offices. We need to educate our court systems. I'm done ranting now.
I guess I can add a bit of detail on how it looks like from outside the US, and the reality is, and it never ceases to amaze me how unprepared someone like Gensler, because it happened as well with Yellen recently, but how unprepared they are for these basic questions which are being asked all the time. Almost to the level of incompetence, right? So, and you're thinking, if this is one of the top guys who's leading the charge, or who's going to be responsible for regulating the space, what chance do we have, right? There doesn't seem to be. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's absolutely no certainty. And it just feels from here, and the US market being as big as it is, it's just a missed opportunity. Just, you're losing people, you're losing projects, and you're losing time, because if you could have had something implemented 4 or 5 years ago, which realistically you could have, then imagine the amount of projects that would have been born and would have now been in a fairly mature state already 4 or 5 years on, if there would have been that legal and that regulatory certainty. And I really thought it was, again, very timely that we saw Brian Armstrong travel to the UK and meet with regulators and authorities in the UK. But as you know, Gibraltar and the UK are inextricably linked, and I've always felt the same for the UK. The UK has gone through massive changes recently with Brexit, and leaving the EU. And you would have thought that they would have just grasped this opportunity with crypto with both hands, and just realized the potential that it had, the potential of adding to the country's GDP at a time of need, clearly, economically. And I just thought it was incredible to see how Brian Armstrong was in the UK, almost like making a bit of a statement to the US, as in, we can go somewhere else. But at the same time, I was speaking to my UK crypto lawyer friends, and they were like, again, we could have been ready for this 2, 3, 4 years ago. So yes, and that's how it looks from our side, and maybe it's a bit more clearer from my perspective as a Gibraltar lawyer, because we've had a DLT specific framework since in force since the 1st of January 2018. So we know how to treat crypto. we have the legal and the regulatory certainty, and by extension, we have the tax certainty, which is a big deal as well. The law is principles based, so it's not prescriptive. We leave it open because if in this space, we know if you create something which is very prescriptive, it might be out of date in a few months' time or before it even gets approved. So you need to give it a bit of flexibility. And it's crazy how back when we introduced it, we thought, okay, we might have a runway of 2 or 3 years here where we're ahead of the curve before other countries.
And you still are.
And it's incredible how it still feels that we're at least 1 or 2 years before MiCA comes into play, and still 2, 3, who knows how long with the US. So yeah, for me, it's actually fascinating to see where you've got the top tech companies in the world out of the US, but still they can't seem to get a grip and get their act together with respect to crypto. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I've been saying one thing also I would say about the hearing is that, and maybe we can move on if you want to, Dave. But the last comment I would make on the hearing is that my reaction is that I felt somewhat vindicated in a sense. I don't like the fact that I'm always right. Just kidding. I'm definitely not always right. But and I definitely don't like the fact that I was right on this issue, though, because for years I've been telling people, and unfortunately, as a US-based lawyer that would love to see innovation happen here, I've been telling clients for years that, if you really want clarity, you might want to go look at other jurisdictions. And, people didn't want to hear that for a long time. And I'm very envious, Aaron, of, you being able to practice in a place in Gibraltar, where you have clear guidance on specific things and how to innovate in this space. But I think I've seen, amongst my crypto lawyer friends or people that, that follow this space and have come into it more recently, is that they are now seeing that, yeah, it is a mess in the United States right now. They're ready to admit that today more than they were even 3 years ago. So, the tide has gone down and it's gotten bad. And, I feel like we're set to get better. But unfortunately, there's a lot of work to be done here with as far as the regulation landscape goes.
So we'll get a bit more into, the word jurisdictional arbitrage. I know I said no big word, but that word kind of pops up a bit to describe a situation where, INX is different. We're US regulated from day one. So, we worked with the regulators, as Aaron mentioned, from being the only token that was publicly listed through an IPO process that didn't go through any of the exemptions, but rather went the full IPO route. But we're obviously aware of what's happening in the rest of the space, and we'll definitely come back to that. The idea that some jurisdictions can benefit from the hesitancy of others, like the US, to give clarity to the crypto space. I want to touch on a specific point that happened during the hearing. And Aaron, you mentioned the fact that Gensler was asked a bunch of questions that he couldn't answer. Now, the most famous of those questions was, is ETH a security? So I want to kind of know what you guys think, and maybe take a step back and explain, where does the drawing line between a utility token and a security, where's that drawn? Where's that line? And does ETH cross that line in your mind? Obviously, nothing here is any sort of advice.
I didn't know. You froze up there, Dave. I don't know if you were directing that to anyone in particular, but I'll just jump in quickly and say that was one of the more frustrating and annoying parts of the hearing, right? That even with a direct question on ETH, and you're talking to a guy again who more and more recently he takes every opportunity to say that essentially everything's a security, right? And then when given the opportunity then to clarify that on a very important token, obviously with ETH, he just waffled and wouldn't even address the question. So yeah, I don't know whether it is or not. I'd like to think it's not a security, but we need clear guidance. And I've seen other analyses on this that say, well, maybe ETH was a security when it launched, but maybe now it's not. Or there are a lot of nuances out there, and that's where we need regulators to give us some guidance. And so, Aaron, you mentioned Brian Anderson with Coinbase. I think it ties into this, so I'll just bring this up now. But Coinbase recently had to file a writ of mandamus, or essentially an appeal directly to the Court of Appeals that oversees the Administrative Law Act in the United States that governs regulators, right, and agencies in the United States, asking the Court of Appeals, the Federal Circuit, to essentially force Coinbase to respond to them. I mean, imagine it's like, David, if I've sent you messages and emails asking you a question, and you won't answer for months and months and months and months, and I have to go to some kind of a higher authority. Hey, make David just say no to me, at least, which is all that they're asking the Court of Appeals to do. They're saying in their petition, look, we've asked Coinbase is saying we've asked the SEC to tell us whether or not they're going to open for comments and make some rules and regulations, right, and allow us to comment on those rules. And they won't even say no, they won't do that, even though since that time, 9 months ago, they've continually done many things and made many statements publicly to indicate that they're definitely not going to, that they don't think they need to make rules. Gary Gensler says, hey, no, it's not a matter of clarifying the guidance. It's a matter of just complying with what's already out there. So in his mind, he's made it clear that he thinks that all the regulation that needs to exist already exists, and all the laws that need to exist already exist. But the mere fact that he can't even answer whether ETH is a security, I think, kind of proves that that's not true. So
and it was actually quite crazy. And what I found even more frustrating was that the congressman didn't allow him to finish whatever kind of response he had ready, but because I wanted to hear exactly what he was trying to say, because it almost felt as if he was going to say that Ethereum could be or could not be, like to that ridiculous extent. So it might be today and it's not tomorrow. And it would have been good just to hear that, because what we got was nothing really. The congressman was kept interrupting. And another clip that I saw, and I haven't been able to verify when if it was a course or a talk that he gave. You might have seen it. I think it was back in 2018 as well. So maybe it was the MIT course that he gave, where he was saying that, he said in the US, in Canada, and in Taiwan, where you've got the Howey test or something similar, that 75% of the tokens out there are not securities. And I don't know if you've seen the clip. It's quite incredible to think that it's the same person talking.
So I think that was a clip of him when he was a professor at MIT with his course on blockchain.
Yeah.
But also, I think he said that the proof of stake mechanism would make anything a security. And also, John, you alluded to the fact that a Howey analysis on ETH in its early days would have made it a security. So really the question is, if you ran a Howey analysis today, the question would be, to what extent is ETH still decentralized post merge? It's not like a question that's easy to answer from a yes or no perspective, but it's a question that if a court had to answer, it would have, and you'd assume that and the CFTC has also said that it's a commodity. So you would assume that with the proper forewarning that Gary was given, and given that information, he would be able to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that's a good point what you just said, Yitzi, that if I had to, stake my license on whether ETH is or isn't a security, I mean, I guess I would have to say it's a commodity, because the highest authority in the United States anyway that is weighed in on this officially is the CFTC, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. Now, of course, they have a self-interested reason to say it's a commodity, because if they're looking to expand their, authority on this, then being a commodity puts it within their wheelhouse and oversight. But I mean, that's some clear guidance that we have. But I'm sure that if the SEC decided that they wanted to bring, if Gary Gensler decides to bring some kind of an enforcement action against the Ethereum Foundation or against any entity having to do with something to do with Ethereum staking, for example, then Gary would be clearly 100% a security, and they would say that that's the case. So again, the fact that it could go either way and that different agencies have said different things just kind of underscores the frustration and the difficulty we have at this point in time.
Yeah. And to add to that, from outside the US, where there's no Howey test, so in the EU, for example, and including Gibraltar, it's a much easier analysis, David. So people feel that sometimes that the US regulator is almost what they say is what counts around the world, right? And it's not the case. So here in the EU or here in Gibraltar, we would look, and you're looking at a different piece of legislation. Is it a share? Is it a bond? Is it a derivative? Is it a unit in a collective investment scheme? And you're trying to fit a token, say Ethereum in this case, you're trying to see whether it fits in any of those buckets. And if it doesn't, then it's not a security. And that is as well very, very helpful. And that's not something which is only present in Gibraltar because of our DLT regulation. That's actually the case throughout Europe, where we have the same sort of like financial services regulations. So I think it's very complicated in the US and in Canada. I only learned the other day that Taiwan had a similar test. But in the rest of the world, the analysis seems to be much easier. Yeti, I'm not sure what the analysis in Israel would be interested to know, but it's like the Howey test isn't the test that you need to apply worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Howey, the result of a Howey test would take you to a similar place that much of the other regulatory frameworks definitions would take you to. So while we don't have a Howey test in Israel or in various European jurisdictions, I think that if you compared the results of a Howey test to the definitions of securities under those frameworks, it would look the same. And I imagine that there have, in each respective jurisdiction, the courts have opined at one time or another on what classifies a security in various cases where it wasn't very clear cut. The frustrating thing with the SEC now is that it almost seems like there's no rhyme or reason, because we have the purpose of laws is for people to know how to be instructed on how they're supposed to behave, and we have laws and we have precedents that were set by courts, and typically our clientele, and I'm sure yours as well, try to behave within those laws so that they don't find themselves behind bars or wasting insane amounts of money. But what we've seen time and time again is the SEC and certain courts as well, just going completely against those rules and interpreting them so broadly that they don't make sense anymore. Like we had in the case of a few months ago of Libri or Library at LBRY. It was a token that was through a very liberal Howey analysis was determined to be a security, and then they basically just had to shut down their entire operation because they couldn't afford to be operational anymore. And I think it's unfortunate because with clear rules in advance and with less arbitrary rulings by courts, they wouldn't have found themselves in that situation. And I think other companies look at the results of Libri and they're scared. They're scared to do, they're scared even if they have competent lawyers on their side who are, helping them and holding their hand and trying to, interpret what would be rules, because because the interpretations don't make sense anymore. Okay, because you used to be able to look at at the laws and at the court precedents and say, okay, based on how the court has opined in the past and based on the laws, this is how you're supposed to conduct yourself. But no, it doesn't always lead to the same result. So that that uncertainty is very, very dangerous for any business who's going to be spending a considerable amount of their own money and the money of their investors and wanting to go in a certain direction and build a certain product or whatever it is. And we need, and again that's why we need clarity. Whatever it is, regulation is a good thing. I agree with you told me that many of David, you told me many of INX's followers and supporters are pro-regulation, and I like that. I'm also pro-regulation for the reason that people need rules. They need to know how they're supposed to behave, and what the implications of one way of conducting yourself or another are.
I want to get to DAOs in a bit, because DAOs kind of challenge a lot of what we've said. Because people need rules. Who sets the rules? Governments, courts. But now we have sort of this alternative. It's very nascent. Hasn't really reached any level of maturity. But we have this alternative governance system that the people set the rules based on coin voting. Before I get to that, Yitzhak, I'm not too familiar with the details of the case, but I am familiar with I have heard about the Libri case, and I don't want to speak to them specifically, but I think there's something to be said about 90% of coins out there where there's a website, there's a founding team, there's people that are incentivized to work for the number go up, for the token price to raise. There's I'm sure we're all familiar with the tokenomics of most projects where a large chunk is kept for advisors and team, and that kind of if it looks like a security and it smells like a security, even if people try and I'm not getting into staking now or yield generation, which is a little bit more complex, but in most of these cases, even if the company tries to hide behind this utility or this governance facade, at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of signs that these tokens are intended as investment vehicles, and they are intended as a way to raise money from the community to build. That's why an ICO will never tell you where the proceeds of the money is going, because they can't say I'm using the proceeds to build a technology, because that's the common enterprise clause of Howey. So I think there's something to be said about if it looks like a security, it smells like a security, it's a security. When that line gets drawn between that and a protocol that's decentralizing, but obviously nothing can start off decentralized. You need someone to write the code and build a website and launch the community, and only then can something take off as decentralized. So, there's still, not everything should be a security, but at the end of the day, not every utility token that calls itself such is actually a utility token.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Not everything is a security, and not everything isn't. If it is, go to INX. There.
Well,
we had to have a shill at some point.
No, I mean, Mitzi and I had this debate about the NFTs versus security tokens back a while ago, where we were debating some sort of.
The focus of my practice is trying to help my clients steer clear of securities laws because they're for various reasons. And the focus of your company is to have more security tokens and for them to have a safe home to come to. And but yeah, I guess we could leave that discussion to another time so it doesn't get violent in here. But on the topic of DAOs, and at the risk of talking for too long, because I know that I've been hogging the mic, I'll just say that DAOs are and have been a huge mess because the term has just been broadly overused, in my opinion. What started off as a vision, an idea I think initially proposed by Vitalik for, organizations that are decentralized and autonomous. It got to a point where everybody is calling anything a DAO. In many cases, it's just like a Discord with a voting mechanism. I can't tell you how many times I've like bought into some random NFT project, and then I join a Discord, and they're like, "Welcome to the DAO." And I'm like, "Oh, shit, get me out of here," because DAOs have real implications. Depending on how they're structured and what the framework is, and we'll go into that in a minute. And I've just been like continually frustrated by what DAOs have evolved into, and how the term has been grossly misused. And then last week, Gabriel Shapiro of Delphi Labs released a fantastic article, proposal, I guess you can call it. I think I shared it in some of the groups that we're on. We share it together, David. It's called Assimilating the Borg, a new framework for crypto law entities. And basically he outlines, it's a great read. I highly recommend. Maybe we could put in the show notes afterwards. He outlines the problems with DAOs until now, and then proposes a new format for how real decentralized and autonomous organizations could look like. I highly recommend reading. I can't. It's like 25 pages or something, so I can't sum it up for you just now. But suffice to say that there are many problems with DAOs in the way that they're structured and perceived today, and perhaps if we take just a few of what Gabe suggests and put it into action, we could hope to see some real decentralized autonomous organizations in the future.
Yeah. So let's. I want to just curious. What do you think what the real DAO look like? We're nearing the end of the show, so I like to take that with a future orientated outlook, and we have the luxury of being forward thinkers by definition, but now we can look a few more years down the future. So what's the real DAO look like? What are the characteristics and maybe the legal characteristics of a real DAO?
And I'd love to take that and talk about DAOs in general. But before I talk about some of the things happening in the United States, I was curious, if to Aaron, if I can throw a question out there to you. I mean, because Gibraltar has so many laws and regulations in place within the space, are DAOs something? I'm not familiar with whether there's any kind of treatment or anything with DAOs where you're at.
No, there isn't, and I'm happy that there isn't, because in terms of trying to call it what you want, incorporate a DAO or have a legal entity representing a DAO, for me, it's just counterintuitive. It's contradictory. Let's not forget, the D is for decentralization. The minute you have a legal entity, then you're not decentralized anymore. So what's actually happening, right? Which one are you? Are you decentralized or are you not? And I think a lot of the issues have come, and if I may, most of them that I have seen have come out of the US, which is in and John, correct me if not, but there's been a big focus on creating these DAOs where you've got very big token holders, bag holders, and the whole point is to limit the liability of these big token holders in these DAOs. Now, again, I think you're trying to, or if you try to incorporate the DAO or create a foundation where things happen through the foundation, for starters, I don't think any of the structures that I've seen would hold or would sustain any scrutiny. That's for starters. In practice, what happens is that if there's any votes, the token holders are voting with their own tokens. So it's not as if they're giving their tokens to the foundation that votes on their behalf. So this push that there's been as well with DAOs following the Uki DAO case, I've seen people trying to push square pegs into round holes. So our position here is, and very rightly so, Yitzi mentioned Vitalik because he produced one of the first articles, which I think everyone should read, whether you're a lawyer or not. It's called "The Meaning of Decentralization." It was a hugely successful Medium article, and there he talks. I'm not going to get into it, but he talks about architectural decentralization, political decentralization, and logical decentralization as the three pillars of how to get decentralized. David, going back to your point. But from a legal perspective and from a Gibraltar perspective, John, to tie it back to your question, I think there's another pillar which concerns us, which is the legal and regulatory decentralization, right? So just think about normal regulation, think about normal tax laws, how they apply, where is a project based, where is it operating out of, where is the mind and management? And I think those are the questions that you would apply to a DAO. So is it decentralized? What's important for me to advise you on from a Gibraltar perspective is it in Gibraltar? Because decentralized means it's not in any one place. But I always give the example, if you're in the UK and there's 1 million token holders with one token each, then you're thinking, this looks really decentralized, right? This looks good. But if they're all in the UK, then it might be an unregistered partnership. And if it's an investment DAO, try to argue against the UK tax authorities that it shouldn't be paying tax in the UK. What's your argument going to? The protocol need to be decentralized, the DAO itself architecturally from a technological perspective, but then how are they distributed, decentralized in different jurisdictions around the world? Because what you don't want is to have a very big presence in one jurisdiction, because that's the jurisdiction that's going to capture you. And in the US, as we well know, it's the most you really don't want the presence to be in the US, because that's where they're going to capture you. And as far as I know, that's one of the biggest concerns with Ethereum, that the biggest stakers are there now. So what we are doing here in Gibraltar is we are not creating a legal entity for DAOs. We are setting up foundations, but foundations that neither control the DAO and the DAO does not control the foundation. So it is, I wouldn't say arm's length, but there is the foundation is set up for the benefit of the DAO or for the benefit of the protocol. And so the interests are aligned. So what you find is that if anything, and we don't get involved with the DAO and the structure, if there's a vote that happens at the DAO level, then most likely, as long as it's not illegal, immoral, or against Gibraltar public policy, the foundation will execute the will of the DAO. And that's how we are helping these type of structures at the moment. But I think I agree with Yitzi, there's been, the term DAO has been used too loosely. And I just think we need to bring it back and start educating people again.
Yeah, and I think the whole purpose of a DAO is, to try to automate certain decisions or actions within kind of what we've known up to now as a corporate structure that requires decision making coming kind of from the top down, to be made maybe more collectively, right? And so I think, as far as DAOs go, we definitely are very early with DAOs, and as they do stem from sort of more of, I think at this point still a philosophical perspective, with Vitalik's article being the genesis, and I agree with it. I mean, a great article, not just for DAOs, but for many things within this space. I think going back, for me anyways, I found that going back and reading some of these foundational things after being in the weeds for a while is really good to clarify some perspective, and as a reminder of why we're here and what we're trying to do. But I think the problem with DAOs is that we're talking about a decentralized autonomous organization, and most things today that call themselves DAOs are neither decentralized fully, nor autonomous. It requires human action. So there's people playing with different names. I've seen in some jurisdictions talking about taking out the autonomous part of it, or I also recommend the article that Yitzi alluded to, referenced, with from Gabe Shapiro and his team at Delphi Labs, talking about a Borg. I think it stands for Cybernetic Organization or something short for that. But I think
cybernetic.
Yeah, and I think they're on the right track actually, and I'm really excited to see how this goes because I think, like I said, this is an area where we are very early, and we're going to see some development that will, I think, enhance a lot of the corporate structure and entity structures of how we organize collectively as humans, because really that's what we're talking about with the DAO, right? I mean, there was a point in time where the idea of an LLC was new, actually not that long ago. I mean, an LLC is a pretty new creation. Nevada, where I'm at, was one of the first states, to adopt the LLC statute. Now we have a pretty uniform LLC statute throughout the country. Wyoming pioneered that one, interestingly enough. They were the first state, Wyoming was, to have an LLC statute. And now they were the first state to have a DAO statute. And other states here, our neighbor state, Utah, next to Nevada, has passed a new DAO law, which I think is going to be very interesting once it comes online at the start of 2024, because it takes a lot of things that were out there from Wyoming and other pioneering states and has tried to improve upon it. And they've actually created a new entity type that's called a DLLC, so a decentralized limited liability company. I haven't heard much talk in the out in podcast land and in the circles about what Utah is doing, but I think it's very interesting. And I'm from there originally and have some contacts there and whatnot. And they're a state that because they're a neighbor of Wyoming and similarly minded with Wyoming, I think they're really pushing forward and trying to innovate in the space. But I think that this is something to keep an eye on. We could talk about DAOs for a long time, and I know we're running out of time on this particular session, but I think what's trying to be accomplished with DAOs is just how can humans organize, interact, and even and take the corporate structure, which again, it in and of itself was a new way for humans to interact, to organize, to allocate capital, make decisions with boards, shareholders. Those are all human inventions as well. So what we're trying to do now is to decentralize some of that organizational structure. And that's the whole point of crypto, right? It's disintermediation. I used to have on my bios on socials that I was a decentralization maxi, but I think that made people mistakenly think I was kind of more of an anarchist than I really am, because you can't decentralize everything. But what I've changed it to now actually is a disintermediation maxi. I'm sorry, I'm violating the no big rules.
Huge words.
That's the point of crypto, right? Is to cut out the middleman, to cut out this, make our systems more efficient, and make things more peer-to-peer, right? That's what Bitcoin, you go back to the white papers, talk about going back to foundational documents. Sometimes it's good to just go back and read the Satoshi's white paper and what he was trying to accomplish, or what they were trying to accomplish with Bitcoin was, a peer-to-peer financial network that allows people to trustlessly interact and transact. And so DAOs, I think it's carrying that same mission forward of trying to have, instead of a corporate structure, the way we kind of know it and understand it today as humans, would be to set up a new corporate structure, but decentralize and make things that can be like just automated, make them autonomous, so that we take out human error, human greed, things like that sometimes come in between us as we're trying to organize and create and set structures up to allow us to build and evolve and advance society. Because on a higher philosophical level, that's really what this entire sector should be focused on.
Definitely, and I think we've come to the end of our hour. It's been a wonderful session. I will say that maybe I'll invite you guys back over just for DAOs, because we can dive into it endlessly. And I was talking with some colleagues here today about DAOs being just one facet of the future of work. How people are relying a lot more on AI, on autonomous agents. So you want to pay your autonomous agent for doing some work, like how are you going to pay, or how are you going to get your autonomous agent to vote on what strategic decision should be taken by the entity? You're not going to invite Auto GPT to sit on your board. You're not going to have it vote by mail. There's going to be some sort of cryptographically signed. You don't have to call it a token. Let's not get there again, because Yitzi and I might fight. But you're cryptographically signed vote to decide which way to go, and that's just one little aspect of the future of work, and it's super exciting for you. You guys are all at the forefront of making this a legal reality. Before we close off, maybe you guys want to have some closing comments. How can we get in touch? How can we keep in following you guys, and what are you looking forward to in the next 6 to 8 months of 2023?
So for me, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter is the best way. And what am I expecting? I'm expecting, or I'm hoping for a bull run. That would be really nice. There's been too much bad news in the past 12, 18 months. So a bit of seeing how the market picks up and seeing some reward for all the incredible builders that are working really hard during this time. It would be good to see them now succeed. And my final comment was actually going to be a recommendation, which is 2 books that I'm reading now, actually at the same time. One is Kicking the Hornet's Nest, which is the complete writings of Satoshi, but in chronological order, which is extremely helpful, or at least for me. The other one that I was reading wasn't in chronological order. And I'm also reading Proof of Stake, which is Vitalik's story. So I think those 2, and as John said before, it's incredible how when you've already jumped straight into the rabbit hole and you've been in the space for a long time, when you go back to the initial writings, it's incredible how much you learn, but also how you realize how incredible these people were, how magnificent, and how their minds were so ahead of their time. So big recommendation on those 2 books.
Nice. I'm going to read the Kicking the Hornet's Nest for sure. Like, I think, as you said, the chronology, I'm a big white paper guy, and I've actually written quite an intensive commentary on the white paper that I haven't published yet. But, I talk about it in the, biblical, more religious sense, where like a religious scholar, the way they analyze white papers, the way they analyze text, the way they pay attention to the nuance. And sometimes what's left unsaid is even more important. And when you're talking about the white paper, I think that's where the Bitcoin Cash maxis kind of erred, is that they didn't take it in context. They just read the white paper as literally, and that's one of the biggest mistakes you could make reading any text ever, especially seminal foundational text like the white paper or religious text, is that you don't have a proper context. And that lets you make mistakes like, okay, the heading says peer-to-peer cash, so I got to make the blocks bigger in order to, be in line with the white paper. When in actual fact, Satoshi's entire, magnum opus is all these writings, and you have to understand how he developed his thought process until the white paper in order to really understand his intentions behind every single thing that he said over there.
Yeah, amazing. Looking forward to it.
John, go ahead. I'll go last.
Okay, yeah. So, thanks again. It's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed Yitzi and Aaron. Who knew that, we met at, it was the NFT NYC conference when we were all in town in New York, and I think it was June of last year, so about a year ago.
That's right.
And so it's really cool to be here talking with both of you and sharing our collective knowledge and, debating these interesting topics. This is why I love crypto. I mean, here I am, talking to people around the world and sharing our perspectives. And I think, this is the future of human collaboration, right? That's what's exciting. But I can be found, I'm most active on Twitter, as my handle there is Metaverse Lawyer. So I try to look at the whole metaverse, and, I'm seeing this as a big world, and we're all just living and interacting in it, right? But that's where I'm most active. I hope anyone that watching can reach out to me. I just love having these discussions. And let's see what else. I guess that's it. Thanks again for having me here, David.
Yeah, it's really been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed being on here with all 3 of you guys. You could find me on Telegram or Twitter at IJHAMMER, IJHammer. It's the same handle for both. Or on LinkedIn. I'm most active probably on LinkedIn and then Twitter. And if you just want to DM me, feel free to reach out on Telegram. I will also add a book recommendation, not so much related to DAOs or regulation, but it definitely echoes what both of you said in terms of like when you're deep in something for a long time, it's kind of helps to like zoom out a little bit. And this book that I've been reading that I recently recommended on LinkedIn is called Tracers in the Dark by Andy Greenberg, and it's like a techno thriller. It goes back to the early, well, not so early days, but like the Middle Ages of crypto, where law enforcement agencies just like started to interpret what actual blockchain transactions mean, and how they could trace them back to the various many criminal masterminds that were kind of just taking advantage of crypto in its early days. I think one of the biggest difficulties in onboarding people to crypto and to blockchain, and what's really hampering mass adoption, which is something that I think all of us would love to see, is that and I think this is true with any new burgeoning industry and technology, is that it's just been used by so many people for the wrong reasons, and there have been so many bad actors involved in this space. So this kind of showcases how law enforcement came to understand what all this blockchain stuff means, and they started going after criminals in the space. So really a great read. And it kind of like shows you, I've been involved in crypto for a while, but I didn't know a lot of the things that were going on, like in other aspects of crypto at the time, just in terms of like, the Silk Road. I saw, in various articles in the news, like what was going on, but I wasn't a consumer or involved in law enforcement at the time. So it's really interesting. Highly recommend Tracers in the Dark by Andy Greenberg. Thank you guys for this conversation. It was phenomenal.
And I should mention that I can also be reached directly on Telegram, same handle at Metaverse Lawyer. So
thank you, gentlemen. Have a wonderful Thursday weekend, and I'm sure we'll catch you very soon.
All right, take care.
Newton witnessed an apple falling and discovered gravity. Ruth Graves tried to bake a cake and accidentally discovered chocolate chips. Tracy Chapman was busking her way to her big break. We all wish for one opportunity, one unexpected chance to succeed, one rare possibility to change our lives forever. We can't all wait for an apple to fall, but we all want to be in the right place at the right time, where opportunities are carefully suggested and possibilities are available to all. INX One, wealth of investment opportunities.